Welcome back, everyone, to the GDFL podcast, hosted by yours truly, Andrew Korn. I forgot to update the title slide. I'm just going to be doing a solo show, so Mark is not a guest this week. Apologies for all the Mark fans out there, because she was back on the show this week. I didn't ask for him to come back. I'm just kind of rambling now, but it's just me. Deal with it. Pretty interesting slate of GDFL action this past week. Jake beat me 154 to 126. Stun beat Logan 149 to 91. Chaz beat True 125 to 78. Mark beat Sokol 178 to 115. Beans beat Levi 105 to 87. And last, Ryan beat Trevor 123 to 75. So just going from the top, my matchup versus Jake. It started out with an absolute banger for Jake. Both Jalen Hurts and Cam Scatterbo combined for 50 points, while my Devontae Smith only had seven. I kind of thought like didn't really have much of a shot on like going into the week after that when you down 43 after the first round of games. And HN had a great game. Dak had a good game. I had to start Aaron Rodgers because Kyler was out. More on that later. Uh, Shad White was solid, but yeah, I mean, I was starting Michael Carter and Hassan Haskins this week because Nico Collins and Justin Jefferson were on bye. Not a ton I could have done better I mean, I could have made a trade, I suppose, to make my lineup better, but Jake scoring 154 is a pretty tough mark to beat. That's usually in line for what the top score is for each week. Yeah, looking at Jake's team, I already mentioned Hurts and Scatabo. Jamar Chase had a second huge week in a row. Maybe he'll be better now that Flacco's there instead of Browning. It seems like Flacco's a lot more willing to rip it to him. And then, yeah, I mean, Daniel Jones also had a pretty good game. Now, the other big one I want to call out is that Chargers debate, whether it be Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vidal, who'd be the lead back this week. Well, I think it's pretty clearly going to be Kamani Vidal. So Jake might have some more interesting lineup decisions in the future. Next one I have is Stun and Logan. Stun beat him pretty handily, although Logan would have beat three of us this week. It is impressive that he did score a whole 91 points. For Stun, Saquon had a pretty down game, though JSN and Pickens both continued to absolutely ball out. Herbert had a good game. T-Law was good. Yeah, the story's still the same with Stun. I mean, he's been in first for a few weeks now, and his team's just rolling. And then there's really not much to say about Logan's team other than it would have been three of us this week. Not to brag about when you score 91 points. Josh Jacobs did continues to have a really, I think that's his second week in a row where he's had about 30 points. Uh, We'll see if Logan decides to hold on to Josh Jacobs if someone's willing to put in an offer to move off of him. That's like the one player on Logan's team I'm curious to see what he does with. Up next, we have Chaz and Shrew. For Shrew's side, Caleb was pretty solid. Garrett Wilson got injured in the game and he's getting his pass retained this week, so really don't think you could have expected too much out of him. Yeah, Shrew had a whole bunch of duds in his lineup. I mean, Hollywood had two touchdowns, which kind of saved his day. But yeah, I mean, looking at Shrew's lineup, he only had Hollywood had 18, and Kraft had 11, AJ Brown had 11, and then Caleb had about 20. And his other six players all pretty much had five or less, and emphasis on the less because some of them had like one or two. It's been a season from hell for Shrew a bit here. And I'm just not really sure if things are going to get better with like Garrett Wilson left early with injury. I mean, he will have two quarterbacks next week. Didn't have two quarterbacks the past 2 weeks now. But yeah, it's looking pretty ugly for sure. On Chaz's side of the ledger, looks like CMC had a pretty solid day. Darnold had a solid day. He did start, I didn't know this. Chaz started Tez Johnson, so he had that Baker Tez Johnson stack. And Tez Johnson did have that a 45-yard touchdown. So good for Chaz. That was a pretty ballsy start, but I get it. Like if you're going to start some rando, you might as well pick a random receiver with your starting quarterback in case they happen to be one of the ones to score a touchdown. So I respect it, Chaz. And I'm looking at his bench here, and like Lamb and Godwin were both out. He could have started Michael Mayer maybe. But yeah, there's really wasn't too many great options for Chaz. Uh, Darnold and Baker though seem to be a really solid quarterback duo for this year. Up next, we have Mark and Sokol. So, talking about Mark's team, I'm not going to fact check this because I'm pretty certain about it, but I think Mark just put the greatest 2 week stretch in GDFL history. I think he had 175 last week, and then he had 178.5 this week. Mark's back. Uh, that's really the big news there is yeah, his team is balling out. Rico Dowdle had his second monster game in a row. It does help when you play the opponents that he has, and he's had really no serious competition, but I think there might be a running back controversy stewing up in Carolina now. And then, yeah, Mark did this with only getting 7 points from Gibbs. He got 11 from Mac Jones. But the big things that Mark had go well for him is Mahomes. Mahomes is back. After 2 down years in a row, Mahomes is looking like the top three pick that Mark had taken him to be. And then, yeah, DK had a great game. Kyron had a good game. Ladd had a good game. And then Drake London had 27 points. Drake London's been balling out lately. Almost, he would have had, would have been like 34 points if he just would have stayed in bounds on his that play at the end of the first half. Yeah, Mark's team is rolling. Then on Sokol's side, I mean, Sokol had an okay week, nothing great. Amon-Ra had a down week. That drop against the Chiefs, I honestly think, is where they lost the game. There's a few things I'll talk about the Lions while I'm at it right now. Where, yeah, if Amon-Ra catches that pass on that fourth down, and he should have caught it. I know it wasn't a great throw, but when it's in your hands, you got to catch it. Uh, We were up 10-6 at the time, and there's about, what was that, like 5, 6 minutes left in the second quarter. I think we really could have just like milked most of that clock and then gone into the half with a 13-6 or a 17-6 lead. Instead, the Chiefs got the ball back, marched down, and scored. And then they got the ball to start the second half, and that kind of made it almost an insurmountable lead at that point, just because the Chiefs' offense was doing pretty well. I know officiating in that game wasn't great, but the Lions really blew most of the opportunities that they had. Like that drop fourth down's the big one, the big one. The other big one I point at is Aiden Hutchinson with that extremely unnecessary late hit on Mahomes. They're going to call that every time. That would have been a third and long. Might have been able to get him off the field. But yeah, boneheaded play there, just kind of killed him. And then also Brian Branch being a dum dum after the game, picking a fight with Juju. I knew as soon as that happened, it's like, yeah, he's gonna get suspended because it happened post game and not during the game. Yeah, Juju did have a pretty cheap shot on him earlier. I understand why Branch didn't take that too kindly. And it was interesting to see social media all back up Branch, even though he's the one who instigated the fight. It shows how much people actually hate Juju. Anywho, going back and looking at Sokol's team. Trevion Henderson's kind of been a disappointment for him. After a huge week last week, Diggs had a pretty bad week. Shakir wasn't great. I mean, the whole Bills passing attack was not good at all this past week. And yeah, I mean, Sokol has had some better days. Kendrick Bourne had a second big week in a row. Unfortunately, was on Sokol's bench. I imagine Sokol will find a spot for Kendrick Bourne here in the near future. Up next, we have Beans over Levi. For Levi, Quinshon Judkins had a pretty down week. That was someone he'd been looking really good and passing the eye test. But the Steelers always eat up rookie quarterbacks, and this week was no exception. Judkins didn't have a particularly great day, even though he's a running back, not a quarterback, but you get the point. Uh, Drake May had an awesome game. Had 3 touchdowns, 27 fantasy points. Josh Downs had a pretty solid game, but yeah, most of Levi's flexes their flex players left something to be desired. Bo Nix also didn't look particularly great against the Jets. And then for Beans, no Lamar, no problem. Bijan put the team on his back and scored 33 points. Dallas Goedert had 21 and a half. And that's really all Beans needed to beat Levi because Beans' team is also not particularly impressive this past week. Remember what I said about Shrew only having a few guys score 10 points? Well, Beans only had 3 players score at least 10 points, and one of them was Tyler Algier scoring 10.3. That was Beans' third best player this week. Enough to get the win, though. Fields was a pretty disastrous. I think it was the first time in years that that team had negative passing yards in a game since Fields took 9 sacks and only had 45 passing yards. And yeah, Sutton wasn't good. Shaheed wasn't good. Cam Ward wasn't good. Cam Ward was so bad his coach got fired. Chase Brown still has been pretty disappointing. T. Higgins was all right, but it wasn't anything spectacular. And then lastly, we have Ryan the Poop Hive beating Trevor 123 to 75. The big thing of note here is Flacco looked a lot more competent than Jake Browning. He was at least willing to throw the ball up to Chase. I think that's like the biggest takeaway I had because that was one of the games I watched this week. I just don't think Flacco's particularly good, but he was better. I think he'll be better for fantasy for this Bengals offense. DeAndre Swift also had a huge game on Monday night, racking up 24 and a half points here. Uh, Ryan's army of receivers, Ted had his, I guess I'd call it a breakout. He only had 3 catches for 29 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns. So like kind of a semi-breakout. But yeah, Keon Coleman, Igbuka, Dunze, Keenan Allen all had pretty mad performances. And then there's really nothing too noticeable on the bench here I want to shout out. And then for Trevor, it was just a bad week for Trevor. Josh Allen only had 15. Trevor's another team who only had 3 players score double digits, and it was Allen with 15, Jinsey with 15, and Golden with 11.7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, Trevor had 4 players score under 5 points. 5 players score under 5 points because he started Dalton Kincaid, who missed the game. So yeah, horrible week for Trevor. 75 points was the lowest total of the week. Not going to win too many games in this league, scoring 75 points. Team will be looking to bounce back, but there might be some injury concerns here moving forward. I'll talk about in a minute. So a new look at the standings. Standings have shaken up a little bit. Stun's in first, tied of Chaz and Ryan. I'm at 5-1. I am 4-2, along with Trevor. Mark and Levi are both 3-3. Sokol's 2-4. Beans is 2-4. Jake is 1-5. Shrew's 1-5, and then Logan is 1-5. So what's interesting to me is when you look at the points for, like Levi being 3-3 with the amount of points he scored, he's 11th in scoring. It almost kind of feels like a miracle. The other things of note for me here is Ryan's team's playing over its head. I don't think it's necessarily as good as the record. He scored 5 less points than Jake on the year, and Ryan's 5-1 and Jake's 1-5. But if you look at the points against column, Jake has allowed 230 more points than Ryan has. So needs to score 40 less points a week than Jake to win. That's the game we play. I'll harp on it. Sometimes you're just lucky. Levi's points against is 587. So like on average, teams are scoring under 100 points versus Levi. Which kind of is what it is, you know. And then looking at the draft order, now that Levi's back out of the playoff picture, Logan's back up to being the projected top 2 picks. Shrew is now at 3, Beans at 4, Jake's at 5, and then Sokol is at 6. And then the playoff picture is what it is right now. Then nothing too noteworthy here. This is kind of what I'm expecting for at least these like top 3, 4 picks at this point. Whole bunch of news and injury report and buys. I think the big one, or not big one, there's a lot of big ones here. Rashi Rice will be back from suspension. That's a huge lift for Levi's team. Levi's really needed an extra flex player in that starting lineup. And if Rice was as good as he was at the start of last year, Levi's going to have a massive lift to his team. Whole bunch of players might return this week with Mike Evans, George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, and Chuba Hubbard all returning. At least with the 49ers pass catchers with Kittle and Pearsall, would be a big lift for me and Trevor if we got those guys back. It'd be a bit of a downgrade for maybe that Kendrick Bourne that Sokol could potentially start. That 49ers offense has still been solid with Mac Jones and the trash cans he's been passing to. I know Jennings was back this week, but Jennings is also incredibly injured. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens with the 49ers offense if some of these guys return. I don't think it's going to affect too much in fantasy, though. McLaurin might be back, would be a big boost for Beans as he's really needed. Like I mentioned before the season started, I thought Beans was a little lighter in the flex positions. He really needs McLaurin back in his lineup if he wants to be making some noise. I don't really think that's going to change too much in fantasy, though, other than helps Beans and then maybe a slight bump to Ryan for Jaden Daniels. CeeDee Lamb might be back this week. It'll be interesting to see. This Cowboys offense has been rolling even without him. I think it's been the top scoring offense in the league right now, if I remember correctly. So if Lamb is back, a huge boost for Chaz as he needs a player like him back. Would probably be a downgrade for both Pickens and Ferguson, who have both been benefiting in his absence. Because I mean, Pickens has been a top five receiver to start the year. I imagine that comes back to earth a little bit once CeeDee Lamb comes back. Though I think there's definitely enough room for both of them to feast. Like last year, both Chase and T. Higgins both were able to feast. I think it definitely could happen in the Cowboys offense as well. And then Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard might return this week, but he also might not be the starter with the way Rico Dowdle's looked. I know Dave Canales wasn't committed to saying Chuba Hubbard's the starter. That would be a very interesting development for Mark and Trevor if Chuba Hubbard is no longer the starter, because that's someone I know Trevor was banking on. Maybe he loses his job, and that might be another starter for Mark in a starting lineup. The biggest injury is Puka Nacua. I mean, I think he's listed as day to day right now. He might be out this week. I think I'm pretty sure the Rams have their bye next week. So if Puka is out, then it'll be next man up for Demonte Adams there, and maybe like someone like Tutu Atwell might have some relevancy. Maybe Stafford gets downgraded a little bit. A few Cardinals injuries. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a concussion, left early, so TBD if he'll be able to play this week. I'm recording this on Tuesday at 8 p.m. I haven't really seen any updates on that since. And then Kyler didn't really practice at all last week. He practiced limited on Friday. Broke Saturday that he was trending towards being out. I wouldn't be too shocked if he's out again this week. So if he's out. I mean, I have Jacoby Brissett. I don't really know if this really affects Trey McBride's fantasy outlook too much. Affects that I won't be starting Kyler. I mean, the Aaron Rodgers plays Thursday against the Bengals, so even if Kyler is back, I mean, I'm definitely starting Dak over Kyler at this point. Probably be starting Aaron Rodgers on Thursday because one, he's against the Bengals, and if I'm not gonna, I'd rather start Aaron Rodgers against the Bengals than Jacoby Brissett against whoever the Cardinals play next week. Two big ones for sure. Garrett Wilson and Brock Bowers are both trending towards being out again, or out again for Bowers, out for the first time for Garrett Wilson, missing the first game of his career. I am scared to see of what that Jets offense is going to look like without Garrett Wilson. It looks so bad against the Broncos. It's not looked good all season. There will be no weapons for Fields to throw to. I think we were looking at like Josh Reynolds being wide receiver one for the Jets this week. Maybe Mason Taylor has a decent game. Maybe Breece Hall gets more involved in the passing game or Isaiah Davis. But I'm expecting it to be a pretty ugly week for the Jets offense and Justin Fields. Calvin Ridley's out. I don't think too many of us are right. I mean, it's like that affects Stun, but Stun's not even starting Ridley. Beans with having Cam Ward, and he might be starting Cam Ward again this week. Not having your best receiver, he's gonna make an ugly offense even worse. Oh, Brian Callahan got fired. Not sure that changes much for fantasy, other than maybe they'll get a more creative play caller in for Tennessee. Didn't have that in my news and injuries, but kind of a big one. Uh, I mean, Brian Callahan was really living off of the Zach Taylor coaching tree, and I think Zach Taylor's an awful coach in Cincinnati. So we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked. I bet they're going to bring in an offensive mind. The rumored names I've seen, one of them was Arthur Smith. I can't remember the other one I saw on Twitter, but it was very much in the same vein as Arthur Smith. I think it was like fifth. It's going to bother me now. I don't remember. It was another former head coach or offensive coordinator who failed as a head coach, but is still a decent OC. So we'll see. I know Arthur Smith was the OC there when Ryan Tannehill was the quarterback of the Titans. So there's a chance that he might reunite with Tennessee. The big team I want to talk about is all the Bucks injuries. So Bucky Irving's expected to be out another week. Sounds like Chris Godwin's gonna be out this week. Like Mike Mbuka had a hamstring injury and will also be out. Mike Evans might return. If he does return, there's no mouths to feed in that Bucks offense right now. It would probably just be Mike Evans and then like Rashad White and Sean Tucker. Maybe Kate Otten has a game. Maybe Chaz starts Tez Johnson again. Maybe Sokol starts Sterling Shepard. I think Sokol is Sterling Shepard. Yeah. Egbuka's a pretty big loss for Ryan. He's been awesome to start the year. Had a slower start this past game before being knocked out. I'm guessing a hamstring injury is probably about 3 or 4 weeks. Seems to be pretty typical. Next is Dalton Kincaid was a late scratch on Sunday or Monday night. That sucks for Trevor. I mean, he has Hunter Henry, who's been hit a pretty hit or miss this year. But yeah, that Bills offense looked pretty bad. I mean, they really just need another new pass catcher. This is something I wanted to bring up that I didn't have in my notes was Yeah, the Falcons defense looks legit. I mean, they completely shut down that Bills offense. Bills really just need to get another receiver in there. And Keon Coleman's kind of just a jump ball specialist. He doesn't really separate or get open. He's kind of hope for the big play and a bit of a red zone threat. Shakir's an okay slot receiver. I don't think he's anything too special of a talent. I mean, I like Khalil Shakir a lot, but he's not like this game breaker at receiver. Josh Palmer is pretty meh. That's a team I'd look for at the trade deadline to see if they bring in a receiver. Some names I've seen floated out there are Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed from the Saints going there. I think both of those would be a lot of fun adding a speedster to that offense. I could see DJ Moore getting traded to maybe open up a spot for Luther Burden in the Bears offense. There's a few other names I'd seen that were pretty interesting. Yeah, I think DJ Moore, the Saints receivers. There's one more I wanted to bring up, but I can't think of it right now. I was on a walk right before this, and I lost that train of thought now. Anywho, buys this week: Bills and Ravens. So for the Bills, Stun won't have James Cook this week, and then Trevor won't have Josh Allen. So I think Jackson Dart will be making his GDFL debut for Trevor this week. Don't really think it's going to be, in fact, too many others in fantasy with the Bills being on bye, though. And then for the Ravens, no Lamar this week, no Derrick Henry for Mark, no Zay Flowers for Levi, are all the notable ones there. And that was a long-winded injury report. Now looking at our matchups for this week, I am playing Beans, Stun is playing Shrew, Sokol's playing Ryan, Jake is playing Levi, Chaz is playing Logan, and then Mark is playing Trevor. So in my matchup with Beans, I'm going to get both Nico Collins and Jefferson back from their buys. I don't really have any notable buys on my team. Beans won't have Lamar. We'll see how that matchup goes. I mean, I think I'm favored to win, but you never know in a game like this. Stun against Shrew. I mean, Stun doesn't have James Cook, but Shrew's team is in shambles right now. I think the projection will end up being higher than what's being shown on screen right now. But I'm expecting Stun to win that one. Sokol versus Ryan is probably my matchup of the week. Uh, Pretty big matchup for both of them. And Ryan's in pole position right now to potentially get a bye. Maybe he'll keep his winning streak going. Sokol isn't. I'm not gonna call it a must win because I don't think he's quite there yet, but it's pretty damn close to being a must win for Sokol's team this week. Falling at 2-5 feels like it'll be really difficult to climb out of that hole for the rest of the season to make it back into the playoff picture. So we'll see if Sokol's able to pull it off. Jake versus Levi, I think, is another huge matchup this week. Levi's floated the idea of buying some players and going back into contention. A loss here this week will make it a lot harder for him to get in that position. And then if Jake can overcome his own five-star and potentially make the playoffs, I mean, he'll have to have a win this week to get it done. That'll be another matchup I'm looking at. Chaz versus Logan. Chaz has his bye week this week. He gets his free win. I'm not too concerned about that one. I say that as I didn't get my free win. And then lastly, Mark versus Trevor. Uh, Trevor's not going to have Allen, probably not going to have Puka, not going to have Kincaid, not going to have Bucky. I don't think Trevor's winning this. I don't think his starting lineup is quite set yet, but I would be kind of shocked if Trevor wins that one with all of his injuries and Mark's team is pretty seemingly firing on all cylinders and at full strength. So special segments this week. I have two that I want to look at. One's a lineup analysis where I'm just going to look at lineup efficiency, and then I'm going to be looking at some schedule analysis too. So first up is the lineup analysis. Which teams have been the best at setting lineups this year? So it's been me at 93%, then Stun at 91%, Trevor at 89, Chaz at 88, Sokol at 86, Shrew at 85, Ryan at 84, Logan at 84, Beans at 83 and a half, Jake at 83, Levi at 80, and Mark at 79. Something that really stands out is I think Stun and I are the top two scorers in the league right now in terms of points for, and we're also setting the most efficient lineups. I'm not too shocked on it for my team because I'm intentionally pretty top heavy. It makes setting your lineup a hell of a lot easier. So not shocked to see me there. I think I was at like 89% last year. I'll pull it up for at the end of the season to another lineup efficiency breakdown. Stun being a big one though. I think he was in the 70s last season and being at 91% is a huge turnaround for Stun. He's gotten a lot better at setting a lineup this year, and his team's deep too. So I think that makes it even all the more impressive. Probably the most impressive one on this list. Yeah, Trevor being at 89%. I mean, his team's also a bit top heavy, so it makes it a little bit easier to set your lineup. I think same. I think we can say of Chaz and Sokol too. Yeah, no, it's not like really like most of the team sits in that. Most of the league historically has been in that 83 to 88 range. I know Levi's at 80%, was a bit lower. And I think a lot of that is he has so many receivers on his team right now that, and a lot of them aren't scoring great weekly or that consistently in fantasy. So that makes it a little bit harder to pick and play which ones you want to start. And then Mark being at 79%. I mean, I've documented his struggles all season staying in a lineup. This past week, it was pretty damn good. Uh, Imagine it's going to get better from here on out. He just had some crazy weeks early in the season from star players not performing, and then some crazy performances on his bench of players he actually probably could have considered starting and just didn't. Imagine Mark will be higher than 79% when the season's over, though. All right, and then looking at some schedule analysis. So right, this is the all play grid. So basically, what this is looking at is if you played every team in the league each week, what would your record be? So the rankings of this are Stun, then Corn, Trevor, Chaz, Sokol, Mark, Ryan, Jake, Beans, Shrew, Levi, and Logan. And yeah, big one that's standing out to me, I mean, Stun's here in first, and the last 5 weeks he's been top three or top. He's been top four every week and top three most of these weeks as well. He's consistently been the third best team pretty much every week all season. Yeah, Stun's got a damn good team. It's been consistent and consistently good. And yeah, his total record is 54 and 52 and 14. I'm in second here at 46 and 20. I have two top scorers in weeks 3 and 5. And then I've been above the median 5 of the 6 weeks. Week 1, my team had a bit of a down week. I ended up getting to win that one. But yeah, I have a couple losses sprinkled in here. Trevor's got an interesting one because he has two top scorers. He has five top half finishes, and even the top half, five of them are top five. But then was last this past week, which really tanked his all play record. Chaz is another team with five top half finishes, so that's Stone would be 6-0 if we had a 2-win system. I'd be 5-1. Trevor would be 5-1. Chaz would be 5-1. Kind of seems to be that the four of us are standing out a little bit higher than the rest of the league in terms of consistency week to week and being the top tier of teams. But not too far behind are Sokol and Mark, who are both 37 and 29. I mean, Sokol would be 3-3 against the median. He does have a one top week, but he has two 5-6s and a 6-5. So his team's been like slightly above average to average most of the season. And then Mark's only 3-3 against the median, but has two elite weeks here, and then a 6-5 and a 1-10, 4-7, 5-6. So yeah, Mark's team's been solid. Uh, Ryan and Jake have the exact same all play record at 31 and 35, but Ryan is 5-1 and Jake is 1-5. So for Ryan, week 1, he had a pretty good week. He was third in the league, but then has been like pretty consistently around the eighth best team since. He has 2 wins above the median. Jake also has 2 wins above the median. His 2 wins above the median would be second and third among all teams in the weeks that's happened for him. And then he has a couple average weeks and then two pretty bad weeks. So yeah, Jake's team is pretty inconsistent. Ryan's team's a lot more consistent. It's just consistently in the middle. Jake's team is just a lot streakier. Beans is also another team that's pretty similar in terms of also 2-4 against the median. His team's also been pretty consistently around that eighth best team, and with the 10-1 week 1, he had a good start to the season. And then we have what would be our bottom three teams in terms of the all play grid, which are Shrew, Levi, and Logan. Shrew has one week where he went 9-2, and then all these other weeks, 2-9, 1-10, 4-7, just not been a good season for Shrew. And then Levi's is 15 and 51, and Logan's is 14 and 52, which really isn't all that. It's only a difference of 1 win in terms of all play. It just happens to be the Levi's won 3 matchups and Logan's won one. And the one Logan won, he was the second high scorer of the league that week. And there are a few other. This was his second best week of the season where he would have been 3 teams. And then for Levi, he has a lowest score and then two 11th place scores on here. Would be 1 and 5 in a 2-win system. Been yeah, not great, but he's been getting wins and he's about to get Rashi Rice back, so we'll see if his season turns around. I guess that turning around is a bad case because he's 3-3. Which also wants me to lead me to the schedule comparison. So for the all play grid, I don't even know if I explained this. This is what your record would be if you played every team each week, and if we scored like that. So for the schedule comparison, in the column it is what your schedule is, and then in your row is how you perform with everyone else's schedule, and then all the ones that are highlighted are your actual record. So for my team, for example, my worst schedules, if I had either Jake or Sokol schedule, I would be 3-3. With my own schedule, I'd be 4-2, and I'm 4-2 or 5-1 with most team schedules. The best one I would have had would have been I'd be undefeated if I had Shrew's schedule to start the year. So yeah, the big ones of note that I want to call out is if we look at Sokol's. So me, Stun, and Mark would all have an okay record if we have Sokol's schedule, but basically everyone else in the league would have a pretty rough start to the season of Sokol's schedule. Another one I want to say was if you look at Levi's schedule, most teams in the league would be 6-0, 5-1, 4-2 with Levi's schedule. Where are some of the other interesting ones? Oh, and Jake's schedule is the other interesting one. No one in the league would have a winning record with Jake's schedule, and most teams would be 1-5 or 0-6 actually. So then yeah, we can look at this. I mean, the all play grid probably does a better job of it. You could also look at points against. I don't necessarily love points for and points against though as like the barometer of like how good your team has been or how easy your schedule has been because those can be pretty heavily influenced by outliers. I think the all play grid and then like the schedule comparison do a better job of like actually demonstrating where your team would rank. Have I been lucky? Has my team actually been good? Just because the outlier effect when you have such a small sample size is very real. Yeah, I mean, I would have a good record no matter. Same with Stun. Stun would have a pretty good record no matter what his schedule would be. Although Stun would only be 3-3 with my schedule, and then so I think that's actually kind of interesting for as good as Stun's team's been. What are some other interesting ones? Yeah, like Shrew's 1-5 with like half the schedules here, but he also could very easily be 3-3 depending on who he would have been matched up against. Sokol's got an interesting one because there's a few 5-1s and 4-2s here. The only schedule that's been worse than his has been Jake's, so it's been kind of tough sliding for Sokol. Levi has had his best case scenario in terms of schedules. He's 3-3. Ryan's he had also been 3-3 if he had his schedule. Beans is in a bit of a worst case scenario as well. Not worst case, but probably below average, where there's a bunch of 3-3s in here. He could have been 5-1 with Ryan's schedule. Would have been 0-6 with Sokol's. Logan, no matter what schedule Logan had, Logan would have a win, which isn't the case for every team. Because yeah, Ryan would have. There's a potential scenario where Shrew, Levi, Beans, and Ryan would all be winless, depending on schedule. Yeah, Logan has a. He's 1-5 of pretty much every schedule, with a few 2-4s in there. Chaz could be anywhere from 2-4 to 5-1, which he is 5-1. It's mostly 4-5-1 or 4-2 though. Yeah, Ryan's is interesting. Ryan's is all over the place. There's a bunch of 2-4s in here. There's a 1-5. There's an 0-6, and then there's like four and twos. Yeah, the schedule Ryan has is his best schedule, and it just happens to be 5-1. For Trevor, Trevor would be 5-1 with a lot of schedules, or 4-2. Again, both Jake and Sokol schedules have been so rough that most teams would have a losing record or 500 record with them. And looking at Mark would be 3-3 or 4-2 of just about everyone's schedule, and then would be 5-1 with Ryan's or 2-4 with Jake's. And then Jake, there's two schedules where he'd be 1-5. That's his and Sokol's. He'd be 2-4 with Chaz's schedule, but otherwise Jake probably should be 3-3 or 4-2. So I mean, I think the moral of the story is there's just a lot of luck that goes into fantasy football. I mean, you play you play who your matchups are, and get whatever hand you're dealt, it's the one you're dealt. This is probably one you'll get a lot more out of it watching it on screen because I'm just kind of listing off numbers. I'm realizing it might not be the most interesting thing to listen to, but this is one that I enjoy looking at because I think this is like a better barometer of how to actually evaluate your team than purely wins and losses or points for, points against. So with that, that's all I have for everyone today. Thank you for listening to the GDFL podcast. As always, it's been a blast. Good best of luck to everyone this week. I'll see you all later.